just let's fix my hair, make it look a little presentable. Okay, whenever you're ready. So I'm here, Kayvon here. I've been actually granted a very special interview with a very truly special and unique Canadian musician and artist, and someone who has been on the music scene here for quite a long time now. Of course, I'm talking to Lee Arron. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Very good. I'm really happy to finally get the opportunity to interview you for the first time. So this is going to sort of put me to the test, so to speak. And I was speaking actually to your husband there, the drummer for your band. And we were talking, I think the first time I'd seen you actually perform was when you had the Slick Chick album. I think it was 2004, and you were playing downstairs at Healy's at Queen and Bathurst here in Toronto, and basically you were pregnant then at the time.
You know, you would be right. Yeah. So
it was all a strictly jazz, stripped down sort of more of an acoustic show. Your husband was drumming, and you were doing the vocals. I think it was just you and your. I can't remember if it was just you and your husband, but I do remember, I can clearly remember this because I do have quite a photographic memory and I remember very trivial things. But one of the things I remember was I went to see this house band that was playing at the time. They bring in a lot of 80s singers. They were playing Montana's that used to be, not like the Montana, the chain of restaurants, but rather one place called Montana, the last best bar that used to be over on the just close by, but further into the entertainment district where the Much Music building is, behind it actually. And they'd bring in like Mike Reno from Loverboy, Jimmy Jameson from Survivor, and they'd have this house band who did all these albums and stuff like that. They would basically bring them in, they have the house band, and in the house band, this is how I met the guy, and he's completely fantastically talented. He's a drummer, Randy Cook. I said that your ex-bandmate Lee Arron's in town tomorrow. You should come and I was at a concert the night before, and I said, come and check her out, surprise her or whatever it was. And he ended up dropping in at that show, and I remember you guys hugging and saying, I haven't seen you in ages. Why don't you come and see me more often, and that sort of thing. How long did you work with Randy?
Randy worked with me off and on throughout the years. Randy played on my fourth album, just the self-titled album, Lee Arron. And he
1987.
From 1987, yes. Geek moment here. And he was not scheduled to perform on to track the Some Girls Do album. We had actually hired another drummer who had toured live with me, a gentleman named Kimio Oki, but there was an issue about 3 days into the recording of that album, which I don't feel at liberty to go into too much detail, but it removed Kimio, unfortunately, from the album project, and I needed someone who could step in, learn the tracks, and rescue that album overnight, basically, because, the clock's ticking away. You're paying $1,000 a day for studio time. And I called Randy, and I was just like, Randy, I'm desperate. I need a drummer, yesterday. And he, in 48 hours, learned all the material and came in and rescued that record, and so he did a great job. And of course, Randy's gone on to do some great. He's living in LA and he's doing a bunch of studio stuff. And and good for him. I mean, he deserves it. He was always a really dedicated person to his craft, and a great guy and a stellar networker. And that's one of the things you need to make it in this industry as well. So
not bad for a boy from Mississauga, Ontario. So, he's hit it big, and let's talk about, actually, speaking with your former bandmates, John Albany. He joined on, I think, on Metal Queen. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's actually pronounced Albany, John Albany.
Albany, let me get that right, sorry.
Yeah, actually, his dad was a fairly well-known hockey player, Johnny Albany. He played for the Sudbury team. And
the Wolves.
Yeah, and I believe it was Sudbury, and Ken Dryden wrote about Johnny Albany in his book. You remember that? Oh yeah. If you're a trivia,
the game. That's right.
The game. So you will find him referenced in that book. So it's Albany is the name. And John joined on the recording of Metal Queen. Actually, he was hired by one of my managers at the time to come in because the band Rabbit was known for such fabulous vocals, and we were looking for some really strong harmonic stuff on Metal Queen. So John came in to track extra guitars and to step in and do vocal arrangements with us. And he and I ended up really connecting and clicking, and we wrote a couple songs together. And lo and behold, he ended up continuing on, and he and I formed a writing partnership that lasted 11 years after that. Yeah.
So basically, he'd obviously been very involved in not only in the songwriting process, but being part of your live lineup. And the funny thing is, I wanted to ask you, when did you end up meeting your husband? How did you just all of a sudden run into him, sort of thing?
Well, it's kind of a comedy of errors. I had moved out to the West Coast in '95, done a couple more albums. I did the Emotional Rain record. I did the album Too Precious with the Sons of Freedom lineup. Right, yeah. And then I took almost all of 1996 off hiatus. After the advent of grunge, just pretty much anybody that was connected to commercial or corporate rock, fell off the face of the planet in terms of the industry attention you were able to, get. And so it was a bit of an eye opener for me and personally to really understand that, seriously, like you are, the music industry is quite transient and superficial on many levels. And I remember almost catching my breath, going, "Wow, like that was it. That was my 15 minutes." And so I took some time off to reassess, and then in '97 I came back onto the scene to do jazz.
How did you get into the whole jazz thing? What influence? What was your inspiration to get into jazz in the first?
During that hiatus, I sort of I cocooned for a while, and I listened to a lot of my favorite old records, and a lot of them were jazz records, old, Sarah Vaughan and Ella Fitzgerald, and Nina Simone is one of my favorites, and a lot of that old stuff. And I don't know, I just found a lot of solace in it. And at one point, a friend of mine at the time said, "Well, it's like crazy. Why don't you just get a piano player? Why don't you just go do this if you like it so much?"
Become a jazz siren.
Well, and at the time, it wasn't about building anything big. It was just to go play and set foot on a stage again. I wanted to distance myself from the pop culture scene. And I thought, this is an underground thing I can just do and do it I did it just for pleasure and because I enjoyed singing that kind of music. It evolved into a lot of media attention, me getting more nightclubs, and then people going, "You got to do a record, you got to do a record," and ultimately end up recording. But to make a long story short, how I met my husband was that I had an ensemble together, and occasionally my drummer would need to sub out, and I had worked with a horn player, a guy named Graham Howell, who I still works with me quite frequently, and he kept saying, "Oh, you got to play with John Cody." He said, you should get him to sub for Matt, and when Matt can't be here, you guys you'd love his drumming. And so I called him on a couple of occasions, and he never returned my phone call. And, he was kind of a jazz snob. Not that John is a jazz snob, because he plays rock as well, but a bit of a music psychologist and a bit of a snob. And he just thought, "Oh, rock chick from the 80s, and, like little, cutie pie, I don't know, for him that he was almost deterred by my former image, and he just thought, he didn't take it that seriously. And anyway, to make a long story short, I ended up on a tour that went across Canada with a friend from Network Records, put the tour together with myself and a couple of other jazz artists, and we were going to share the A-team from our bands. Right. I wanted my drummer and my keyboard player, right, and my horn player. I won my keyboard player and my horn player, but they ended up bringing his drummer, and his drummer happened to be John Cody. So I ended up on tour with John for 6 weeks. And, I don't really know what to say. John always says, by the end of the 6 weeks, he said, "I knew I was going to marry you." And I'm like, "Really? Okay."
That's a bold prediction he made.
And there you go. Here you go. And here we are today, 11 years later. Well, actually, we've been together 13, and we have an 8 and a 9-year-old, and almost 10-year-old, yeah.
So basically, right that time when I caught your first show here in Toronto, that's basically when you just sort of a couple of years before. Did you meet
together when I was pregnant in 2004? We had been together since 2001, and we were expecting our first child.
Okay.
In 2004, yeah. Wow. Yeah, that was Angela.
And basically, he's been involved just strictly in the production of your current material?
John, no, he's involved in the live band and aspects of the business that we do together in terms of, my husband was the one who convinced me to put together the 3 DVD anthology of a bunch of rarities. I wouldn't have done it probably otherwise because it just seemed like such a daunting task to go through all this stuff. But if you've seen our home, which you haven't, we have a library with 250,000 pieces of vinyl, about 15,000 CDs, and about 15,000 movies, all classics.
Your husband's a big movie buff.
Well, we have a music library, basically, and he is a music collegist and a geek that way. And so to him, he's like, the collectors would think this is important, and I don't really think that way, but he does. And so he's convinced me to take on some endeavors that I probably would not have otherwise, and create, sort of legacy material like that, right? So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning, Lee. You were born Karen Lynn Greening, and if Wikipedia, which is not the most reliable site, according to your husband, I know it's not very accurate at times because I've had a wiki page myself at one point, but we won't talk about that. But it said that you were born in Belleville, is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct, yeah.
I always thought you were like Midwest or like Prairie Girl or something, Winnipeg or... did you spend most of your youth there in Belleville?
No, I only lived in Belleville for like a year when I was a little girl. And then my family, I think I lived in Belleville till I was almost 2, not quite 2 years old. And then I actually have memories of this train ride. My father was transferred to Winnipeg with the company that he worked for, so I ended up on a train. My mom was pregnant with my sister at the time, and we went out west. And I lived in Winnipeg, just outside Winnipeg in Transcona, until I was about 8. And then I moved back to the Toronto area and lived in Toronto then for the next 20 years of my life.
And you gone to high school here?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And basically, you got started in music at such an early age. Is it true you started performing in school plays and musicals?
Yeah, very young, actually.